That's a
There
cool.
we go.
Did you want to start, Judy?
I can certainly do that.
Fire away.
Right. Well, obviously, there are a lot of issues out there that will be facing the legislature. But what do you see in this next, in this upcoming session, I guess you would say, or the next 2 years? What do you see as the most pressing issue or issues facing the legislature? And I guess not only that, but and what would what are your, what would be your proposal for addressing those issues?
I'll go first. We have a number of financial issues. And underlying all of those financial issues is PERS. Because PERS affects every single level of government, all of our public employers. It's important to remember that the issue is not about our current plan. Our current plan was actually reformed in 2003. And a lot of the ideas that people have for, quote, reforming PERS actually were addressed in 2003. So the incremental changes will not have a significant effect. When we made the changes in 2003, what we failed to address is the fact that we had already incurred a substantial deficit. And it's that debt that's hanging over all of our heads. The way that you pay off debt is with revenue. And so we have a choice. Right now, we are paying with revenue that should be used for operating costs, to fix our roads, to reduce our class sizes, to hire first responders. Instead of addressing those services that Oregonians want, we're taking those funds and using them to pay this old debt. So what we really need is, instead of continuing to do this Rube Goldberg type of solution, is to sit down and work out a comprehensive plan that includes both revenue and cost cutting, so that we can get to a solution that will get us through this next 20 years as painlessly as possible. But there will be pain, and unfortunately we're all going to do it, because this isn't a problem that just affects public employees, and public employees can't solve this problem. We have to get together and argue out what is the best way to do this.
Okay, Jay.
When you say public employees can't solve this problem, do you mean that they shouldn't, their benefits shouldn't be reduced?
I'm saying whenever you have a long-term liability, like a pension plan, you always want to continue to review it to make sure that you're not getting unintended consequences. I mean, one of the most significant causes of this deficit was failure to pay attention to what money match really did. There used to be 3 different ways to calculate your final benefits, and there was this obscure one called money match, which nobody paid attention to until the significant market gains of the 90s exposed that we had a big hole there. So some of the 2003 reforms were to cut direct contributions from employees, so that employees couldn't use the money match, so that money match wouldn't be an attractive option for them anymore. But when we talk about people getting more than 100%, in most cases, it's because they were employed during the 90s and they were able to take advantage of the money match that happened at that time frame. So you have to keep looking at it. If we'd been looking at it and dealt with it sooner, we would have a much smaller debt to take care of now. So you still have to continue to look at it. There are things like, one of the things that gets floated is we should cap it at $100,000. Well, with the 2003 benefits, where pension basically tops out at 45% of final salary, and you don't have an option to do the money match instead, you got to make $220,000 a year to hit that $100,000 cap. So yeah, there are some employees, but not many. So we're not talking about generating significant amounts of money by doing those caps. Do you do them? Sure, it's housekeeping. But there's a big difference between housekeeping and solving a structural budget deficit, which is what we have right now, and it has to be done.
Jack.
So PERS, exactly, it's the elephant in the room. When we're talking about schools, we're talking about county, city, police, firefighters. All of their payments went up 40% in the last biennium. It's going to go up another 40% in the next biennium, so this is a big issue. I, however, don't think that we need to raise taxes to help pay for the unfunded liability. We have a record amount of revenue coming in. We haven't had this much come in before. There are things that we can do to trim the PERS. We could stop spiking. I don't know if you know exactly what spiking is, but when somebody gets to the end of their about ready to retire, they'll use their overtime, their sick time, their vacation time. They'll load it up so their wages go up, so they'll inflate their payments into PERS. So we can stop that legislatively. We can lower the cap, and there's over 2,000 people that are getting more than $100,000. So I mean, every little bit helps when that money goes back into classrooms and not into a retirement fund. I think that's a win. We can also take off our part-time workers, not all part-time workers, but the part-time workers that are at Parks and Rec and their lifeguards, their teenagers just using jobs as a summertime job for cash. But once they hit a threshold of hours, that you actually have to start paying PERS. And if they're teenagers, they're not looking to retire PERS, you know. So they're and then ultimately changing it into a 401k type plan going forward. So it's the person pays into their own retirement, not the state.
Can I just follow up one more time? So Eileen, were you suggesting, because Jack, you mentioned raising taxes, would that be a suggestion of yours to raise taxes, or what?
I think
do you have a revenue?
I think we have to
revenue?
do both. And I'm not alone in that. The Oregon Business Plan did an editorial last April in which they said the exact same thing. That yes, we want to look at costs, but we have to provide services for Oregonians. And so revenue, needs to be part of that solution as well. I just wanted to clarify, so we addressed some of the spiking in the 96 and the 2003 reforms. So sick time was only available for tier ones. And I think we also cut vacation time out in 2003, but we still do have the issue with overtime.
This is something that Jim Wisnett and I have been talking about.
We've talked about, so overtime, and I think one of the other things that we've talked about is a longer final average instead of just 3 years, 5 years.
That would be good, yeah.
So, which does clarify that. But when you're talking about a structural problem in your budget, you're not going to address it without also addressing revenue. And we have this Rube Goldberg revenue process, which is part legislation, part initiative petition, and a whole lot of fees, which ends up balancing the majority of the budget on individuals and small businesses. We're collecting 11 times as much in the general fund in individual taxes as we are in corporate taxes. And we're collecting them at a higher tax rate than we are in corporate taxes as well. I come from the corporate world. We made our decisions on EBIT, which is earnings without interest or taxes, and constantly had to enforce that discipline. We don't, I'll get a tax break if I buy this. Well, no, you won't. We're not going to count that. That's not the reason that we invest. We invest so that we can increase our revenue. So we want to do the things that can help people invest.
Can I address the corporate tax thing?
Yeah.
She's actually said that she would raise taxes on corporates as well, but I just want to let you know that we are at 20th as a nation for the amount that we tax on corporates. But not only do they tax, but they also pay unemployment insurance taxes. They pay their transit. They pay per mile taxes. So they also have health insurance covered, retirement plans, franchise taxes for their savings that they have. So corporates or businesses have a lot more that they pay. I know as a business I have my own licensing fees, and I have things at the state level and then locally that I pay as well. So not only are they doing corporate taxes, but they are also doing one of the big revenues for the state, which are fees for licensing. Well,
Actually, we are 22nd in corporate taxes. We've read the same literature from the state of Oregon. But when you also consider property tax breaks and lack of sales tax, we are significantly lower in our corporate taxes than our neighbors in Washington and California. We can compare, I think it's fair to compare our business and climate with the West Coast, probably not with Kansas, that has, gone through their own issues.
I would tread carefully though with higher taxes, because if you have a manufacturing company and you're deciding where you want to go put that company, are you going to go to Oregon or are you going to go to Idaho or Texas?
Well,
So let's move on.
Okay.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
Cool.
So.
Let me just did our county commission endorsement, and they spoke a lot about land use, and the question I posed to them was, how much can you actually do as a county commissioner? I mean, it really falls more to you as state representatives. What is your feeling about the current way that Deschutes County is, and your district is zoned, and would you do anything to change that, and what's your sentiments on that?
First, absolutely, I would change it. I think the land use system is kind of broken. The one-size-fits-all land use doesn't work. We need more regional control on how we grow. What's right for Portland is not right for Redmond or Bend, which is not right for Ashland or John Day. We are all different, so we should have regional control for our land use laws. We are protecting farmland, EFU land that over in the valley would grow soil or grow crops because they have good soil. Over here we don't. We're growing sagebrush and then lava rock, so that would be better used for development. So yeah, and then we in Redmond, when we did our urban growth boundary, we did the urban area reserve, so it was an easier process. So I think if we were to follow more of that kind of example where we had county and city collaborative agreements before we went and submitted it to the state. But yeah, I would change. That would be one thing I want to do. And House Bill 4079, the affordable housing pilot project is kind of the foot in the door on that, because either Bend or Redmond will have the opportunity to do affordable housing on 50 acres how they see fit. Bend is on private land, Redmond is on county land. So actually, if I get elected, one of the first things I'd want to do is actually fix that for both cities, because they put a lot of time and effort. City of Redmond's actually over in Salem yesterday testifying, trying to win. So,
We actually agree on a lot as far as land use. I think you use some of my language even. That our land here is not the same as Portland and is not the same as Redmond. However, one of the things that I really want to do is we need to empower our local governments for this. This is about problem solving at the lowest level. Jack mentioned Ben's 9-year process to expand the urban growth boundary, but it's a little deceptive to say it was a 9-year process. What happened originally is Bend put in a very large request. They had some failures in the way they submitted it, which caused a lot of extra delays and extra time. But the biggest opponent to that was actually the Swally Irrigation District. It wasn't people in Portland that opposed it. We did not do the work here in our community to make sure that the stakeholders were on board before we got Salem involved. That was remanded back to Bend. It took Bend 5 years, part of it because of the market crash, but then they did go through a collaborative process and got all of the stakeholders on board. And once they did that and went to Salem, it passed in a matter of months. So this is what I talk about problem solving at the lowest level. And I think that helping our city and county do what they need to do locally, and then taking that up to Salem to ask for whatever help we need in order to getting it done, is much more efficient than having Salem say, well, I'm just gonna throw out this land use planning because it doesn't work for Bend. We need to decide what works for Bend. That's our decision here. And then if it needs to go to that.
How close to your vision of how land use ought to work here is the state model? I mean, what are the things that you would change?
I would like to see a change in, we have land that's zoned out here as exclusive farm use, and we're not farming on it. We need to be a little more open about how we use land that we simply cannot develop well. The other thing that we need to consider, I'd like to look at the sewer law, because in Portland it makes a lot of sense for, somebody's within 300 feet of a sewer, okay, they connect. That's the best way to do it. They're not having to drill through basalt, which is what we are. So something that might cost $15,000 to accomplish in Portland is costing $30,000 to accomplish here in Bend. And that's simply science. It's the difference. We need to be able to make accommodations for that. So if Oregon is going to ask us to follow the exact same laws as Portland, then we should get a break on the costs. I mean, we should really be looking at that. So do we want to give an exemption, or maybe we reduce the amounts for lands that are different? So maybe you have to be within 150. Or if it's $300,000, is the state going to help our homeowners pay for that?
Do you want to follow up?
Yeah, sure. EFU, which I spoke about earlier, absolutely, but also density requirements within the city. Not everybody that moves here to Central Oregon wants to live up. You know, some people want to live out. So, and right now the state requires you to have a certain amount of density before you can grow again.
And you oppose that?
Yeah, I think we need all types of housing. If we're going to fix the housing crisis, you need the next level housing. So when somebody moves into their first home, they buy it for $200,000 or $400,000 here in Bend, but the next level would be $700,000. So you're priced out for a good long time. So we need to be able to have all types of housing.
I have a question.
But
if
you,
don't mind.
yeah, go ahead.
As far as changing EFU, if that's what we want to do to get the growth boundary to go out, how do you see the irrigation districts falling into that?
I had a similar question too, just how those homes, provided those are homes that are put there, how the water is
Those
delivered.
water rights are grandfathered in if
Just
you're.
sell them in.
But some of those don't have water rights out there, I believe, the east side of Bend, that's the whole thing.
When we take in land from the city, we actually either we take the water rights and use it for the city, or you sell it back to or the owner will sell it back to the irrigation district. So that's how they don't go away, they just get them and give them dispersing out to somebody else. Yeah.
It's a big thing around here as far as people believing that
Are you talking about the McMansions that are?
not necessarily that, but just people watering rocks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
well,
is
so
that-
they don't
is that
lose
something that-
so they don't lose them. I mean, that's within the law right now. There's a lot of farmers that are irritated with a lot of those big houses that are off of 97 and Old Bend Redmond that are just watering dirt or not even using the grass that's growing. So there's been talk about doing something about that and trying to figure out. Yeah.
Did you have any comments on that?
No, but I think that what we saw I mean, the reason that I brought it up in the first place is it was about the urban growth boundary. It's about solving with your stakeholders locally, so that we can if we need a solution in Salem, okay, but let's not create laws that we don't need to do.
Can I ask you guys, OSU Cascades is now one of the 8 major universities. They're kind of standing on their own. How do you feel, do you feel that they are getting their fair share of funding from the state, or do you support trying to carve more funding out for the university in the start of their own?
Oh, well, we're always going to try and carve more because, you know, it's the hometown team. I think in the last few years we've seen a lot more. And that actually has come from, you know, bipartisan support from, you know, the governor and from our legislators. And I think that's the key. The growth should be, you know, it would be good for our businesses if that growth actually matched up with the businesses that we have here, or helped grow businesses in this area. So you want to keep business involved in this as well.
So I took a tour of OSU Cascades with Rick Johnson. It was great. They have a wonderful facility. If you've gone and seen it, the dorms are great, the labs are great. And the students actually just approved a $50 increase on their tuition to help build the next student success building. So the students see the value in how important college is. I see the value in how important the college is. They initially went to Salem and asked for $76 million and got denied. And so she has now just gone back every year and asked for just a little chunk to do it, you know, in steps and baby steps. So the master plan looks great. They have to fill up that mine with the landfill, and I think they've got a great plan. Something she also mentioned, this is totally off topic though, but the burn piles that we have on the way to Mount Bachelor, have you seen where they trim all the trees and they stack them into the piles? They were willing to take those and burn them in like a boiler type thing and use it in their dormitories, and they got shut down. So, I mean, because they were gonna be releasing carbon, but we had the forest fires and there was carbon all over in the air anyway, so you think we'd have.
Eventually they burn those piles anyways, don't they?
Well, they're supposed to grind them up. The Department of Forestry is supposed to grind them up and lay it on the ground, but they don't do it. Yeah.
This this conversation makes me think about, okay, both of you are having the potential to replace a longtime legislator who's had, you know, a fair share of influence in the state legislature. First, I thought of this as a question for you, Jack, because you're the Republican running in a that would be working with a legislature that is primarily, or that is majority Democratic, but also considering the fact that the governor's race could go either way, this could really apply to both of you. Just how do you anticipate going about getting bipartisan support for whatever initiatives you want to bring about?
So one of the initial conversations I had with Gene was about how to get a bill passed, and he said, you're not going to do anything unless you get a Democrat to co-sponsor it. And so that would be the mission day one, is to watch across the aisle and make some friends over there and make sure we make some good decisions that we can come together for Central Oregon. I'll be able to lean on Gene a little bit and see his contacts and maybe get him to do some introductions. So I think it would be really important to get over there and make sure that we can do that together.
So I guess making friends, what does that
Well,
mean?
it means going.
What is that?
It means going across the aisle
Uh-huh.
and being willing to talk on the other side and get things done. You know, it doesn't quote mean make friends. Actually, I said that on KTVG, and I had some people come after me and say, "You don't need to make friends over there." So, but what it's meant is just to say, I'm
yes,
gonna walk.
you do.
I'm gonna walk
Oh,
across
yes,
the
you
aisle.
do.
You know, I want to make the initiative. You know, and try to get us to come together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to do a party line vote. I don't think that works. You know, so I'm not on everything. You know.
I want to see the candidate who's an anti-friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Well, I mean, you know, there are those candidates out there, and you brought up a decent point about it's sometimes about party line voting, you know, so, Eileen, any thoughts?
So if I'm elected, I will most likely be the only Democrat from this side of the mountains. Which means I will go into the caucus basically speaking for half the geographic area of Oregon. And I think that's going to give me an outsized voice because I have a different perspective than my friends in the Willamette Valley are going to have. And I think it's very important to understand that most people who do this are doing this with the best of intentions. And they really want to make Oregon better. We have different ideas about it. But when we get underneath, in business, we have the process, we inherited these from the Japanese, of asking the 5 whys. And often the first why gives you a knee-jerk reaction, but as you keep digging under, you start finding, you know, what's the root cause that we need to address? And you get down to the root cause, and then we can find common ground. What's very important, regardless, is that we're building solutions that'll last. Not solutions that carry because my party has the majority or Jack's party has the majority. Because as we've well seen what's going on in Washington, D.C., that flips. And then things get overturned. And we want to get it right the first time, which means you have to listen to those other voices as well. Even though I will be in the caucus, in a lot of ways, I will be that other voice that they need to hear about this side of the mountains. But also, in order for me to represent this side of the mountains to my caucus, I'm going to have to be able to talk with the other legislators from this side, who will generally be on the other party. It's something I'm used to doing. It's the way I negotiated $500 million worth of contracts every year, was by sitting down with people who didn't agree with me. And you just sit at the table until you get it right. It's very difficult work, but I've done it. And I want to keep doing it. And I want to do it for the people of Central Oregon.
Can I add one more thing, is that the Democrats are 1 vote away from a supermajority in both houses, and they have the governor. So I think it's very important that neither party gets a supermajority, because I don't think that would do any good. I think that promotes bad policy, and I think we'd make better policy when we have to cooperate and come together and make a decision. Just wanted to add that in there.
Judy, you have a thought?
Yeah, sure, sort of on that same note. A lot of people, when you get over there, either of you, compromise is treated sometimes by some folks as a dirty word. What's your take on that?
I don't think it's a dirty word. I think
Oh,
when you,
why?
I think when you, well, I kind of did,
Yeah.
with saying that we make better policy when we have to compromise. We do better things for the community when we compromise. So if we become bullheaded and we only see things one direction, or we only see one way, or we don't listen to somebody because they have a different view, then we make bad policies, we make bad decisions.
Can you withstand the pressure from your party?
Did you see what happened to me in the primary? I think I can.
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, not everybody was on board. We split the party half and half. My primary opponent and I won by 2 votes. So, and there was little contentious moments in there. So, yeah, and he attacked me quite a bit. And so I weathered that, and I think I could weather a little bit more, yeah.
Well, I said the same thing in my primary about working across the aisle and compromising and getting the best solutions, and my party elected me by 73%. So I'm pretty sure that if I'm getting things done, my local party is not going to turn against me.
No, it's not your local party when you're over there.
When I'm over there,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you're in
I
a
have to-
caucus and you're gonna have folks that may have an agenda. And if you don't feel that on a particular issue, it meets with the interests of this area.
Mhm.
You
And
have the,
well, and that's a stand that I have to take. You know, a lot of it is, you know, a lot of people really worry about whether or not they're going to get reelected. I am not starting another career. If I only serve 2 years, but I can help get the PERS deficit taken care of, I'm calling that good. That's good enough. I am willing, and I had a reputation in work of being the person who was willing to ask that question that everybody wanted to hear the answer to, but nobody wanted to be the person who actually asked it. And I survived in a highly political, and thrived in a highly political corporate environment, being the person who was willing to stick their neck out. I think in a lot of cases what we need is somebody being willing to lead, because the majority of people want to do the right thing. But somebody's got to get out there in front and do it first. I've been that person, and I can continue to be that person.
I'd like to pivot to education for a moment.
stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry, Judy.
No, go
Perhaps
there,
you
go
had a
there.
better, you
No,
had
no.
yours was better elucidated. Why don't you go ahead and?
I got it. I was glad to hear you, yeah, that's. Well, my question on education has to do with historically here, over the last 3 decades since we moved from a finance system where the local districts were responsible to a state system.
Mm-hmm.
The state has stepped in as well with respect to the functioning and the operational aspects and quite frankly, the substantive aspects. We've had a whole long laundry list of different approaches to what happens in our schoolroom. What do you believe the state role is as far as, I guess you would say, as far as the day-to-day functioning of our schools? I mean, in other words, we've gone through SIM, we've gone through CAM, we've gone through whatever the current, I forget, there's too many
Acronyms out there.
too many acronyms out there. I mean, what do you and everybody talks about we need to raise the graduation rates, we need to do this, we need to do that. I currently sit on the Quality Education Commission. And I guess maybe that's where I'm really dovetailing into. They come out with a report every 2 years, just came out with a report, I don't know if you've seen it. And not only do they list a dollar amount that should be the amount that it is that should be funding, that we should be shooting for to fund education. But in this report, they talk about processes and, ways that local districts are dealing with it and how the state should be supporting that but not dictating that. I guess I want to know what your opinions are in that regard.
Yeah, we kind of have like these unfunded mandates coming down, which is problematic when we're already not meeting the funding requirements of the quality education model, and then we're adding requirements to it. I think we need to step back and realize that the state has an overarching responsibility to set standards in times, in teacher qualifications, in well, you know, what classes need to be taken for graduation. But there's a couple things that we can do. First of all, we can shift the focus to mastery. So instead of saying this many years of math, it's mastery at this level of math, which allows us to shift the focus. So instead of it being about chronological age, we can accommodate students that are at different learning levels. So we can get away from that one size fits all. That, you know, this is a fourth grader and this is a seventh grader. But let's talk about what skills we expect people to have before they move on to the next one. I'm sorry, there was another issue that I wanted to bring up. When we talked about, skip that. Let's talk about if the state is going to have an overview, then one of the advantages that we should have is that the state should understand better how processes move from one state agency to another. So our state agencies tend to be set up in these silos, and we problem solve in that silo. And as a result, within our education, a whole bunch of social issues are starting to come in that teachers are responsible for. And people with very good intentions create these mandates for schools to provide things. And I think we need to start breaking down the silos. For example, when we're talking about the social issues that kids face, teachers are having to be behavioral specialists as well and spending time on behavior issues instead of instruction. In many cases, these are kids that are in the system in one state or another through DHS. Can we, for example, do a pilot program that puts the DHS caseworkers in the schools? So instead of the teachers having to resolve these social issues that the DHS is also working to resolve, that we can actually bridge that relationship. So instead of a teacher doing it, we'll refer the kid over to the social worker, and those issues can be resolved by somebody that is more equipped and better trained to handle it, instead of piling more and more responsibilities onto our schools, which takes time away from instruction.
Okay, so the question was, what do you think the state should have and be
State.
involved with
Yeah,
teaching?
yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I'm looking at, I use the QEC as the, because that's,
Sure.
was put out there
Well,
decades ago as
yeah.
quote unquote the model
So,
for funding and,
Is John Rexner on that?
yes.
Yes. I think I saw a paper on this. Is it 1.2 billion that's needed?
Oh, I'd have to pull out my, something like that, yeah.
Well, I
It's,
mean, if you
think,
look on my
current-
flyer, I am for
Yeah.
fully funding schools. I think we
The
need to
current.
find money to get to schools. But I think we all can agree that we need more teacher-student time. You know, we need more days in school. I think when we kind of got away from it, we have early dismissals on Wednesdays. We have more times off. I don't know how many times we have for teacher prep days that I'm wondering what I kind of have to do with my son that day, you know. So we need more days. We need more student-teacher time. I think the state has a big role with uniform testing and make sure that the quality standards are up to par with all of our schools. And I think all of our schools should have a minimum to meet. But also negotiating with the unions. We have a big deal. That's how we're going to get more teacher time, and that's how we're going to get more days in schools, is by being able to bring the unions to the table and have negotiations with them.
Do you feel like schools are adequately funded right now?
No.
Do you think is it a revenue issue, or do they have enough?
It's PERS. We're paying people to retire, but we're not paying our schools to teach. So I think it's, you know, PERS is such an overreaching thing that we have to try to, that's why it's the number one pressing item that we have to try to tackle.
Well, if we talk about what the funding model is right now, has been since 47 and 50. We take all of the property taxes from all of the counties, mix it with state funds, and then we issue it out to the school districts based on a per student basis. There's some adjustments for transportation or other issues, but it's pretty much, you got this many kids, you get this much money. And PERS does cut into that because that is intended to be operational money. But those districts that looked ahead and have side funds to cover their tier 1 and tier 2 employees have more of that money available. Poorer counties that do not have side accounts and maybe can't get a bond passed easily with their voters, then more of that money that's meant for operations is going to PERS. So PERS does cut into our funding model, and it really cuts in based on wealthy school districts versus poor school districts. So that intention to even it out is not working.
Jack, I wanna go back to one thing you said. What did you mean by uniform testing?
Oh, the testing that the schools perform, standardized tests.
So you support more standardized testing?
No,
or-
I said that they have a big role in it.
Mhm.
I think they should.
Mhm.
That wasn't an endorsement for more of them, though.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So keeping the current level of standardized testing? I'm still not
Yeah, the question was how would the state's involved, or how would the state
Right,
involved,
okay.
and that's all I was just saying.
Administrating that
Yes,
test.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
I gotcha.
So testing has changed a lot, I guess since No Child Left Behind. When I was a kid, we all had standardized tests that we took at the end of the year, and we called them achievement tests, and it was to test how much we had achieved during this year. And it was to help us to place for the following year so that we could get back up to standard. What I'm really not in favor of is saying that that is necessarily a judgment on the teacher or a judgment on the school itself. Because what we really need to look at is how well are our students progressing, and are we helping them progress? Not whether they hit an arbitrary standard, because we don't know where they came into that grade. What we need to do is use testing that helps us provide a better environment for the student, not testing that decides whether or not a teacher is worthy of continuing to teach. Because you can't do that from just a single, that's a single data point, and it's not going to give you the information. We need to look at a child as they go through and using testing to help that child in the right direction.
Mhm. We're getting pretty close
Yeah,
to
we're pretty
time, right?
close.
Yeah.
Anything else that's pressing that you guys we didn't cover?
I'd just like to hear, again, our closing comment about, if each of you could tell us, what do you feel like is the most important differentiation between you and your opponent for this race? And Eileen, will start with you.
Okay. I think it's just the breadth of experience that I bring. As a state legislator, everything is on the table. I mean, anything can show up in your inbox at this point that we need to deal with. My business background has allowed me to learn about other people's point of views and other people's business quickly, so that I can come up to speed and help solve a problem. And again, we do not have people in the legislature that come from a corporate background like I have. And I think that it's really important that we have a lot of different voices, that we don't just have consultants and real estate agents and other people that can manage part-time jobs along with being a legislator. That is a challenge because our legislation is part-time. So it's a unique opportunity for us to have a voice in Salem that we don't have, and I would like to have that opportunity right now.
I think the exact opposite. I think Salem is full of corporate lobbyists, and I think they have enough representation in there right now. But
More than the Realty lobby.
yeah,
More than the
all
Realty
kinds.
lobby,
Well,
okay.
we have two lobbyists. If you look at all the other corporate lobbyists, there's probably 50 of them. But so my experience on the planning commission with land use laws, with housing, the passion of housing, I'm involved in the community. I'm involved with many committees to try to make our neighborhoods safer and more accessible. I'm involved with nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity, Bethlehem Inn, Boys and Girls Club. So I've been involved with the community. I see what we need, and I don't think the answer is higher taxes. Eileen does think that. I do not think that businesses should be subjected to cap and trade. She's mentioned that she's pro or for that. So I mean, that's the biggest difference. We have to look out for we want higher paying jobs, we want higher wages in our jobs, but then we're also going to burden them with more taxes and more regulations. That doesn't work. They're just gonna either lay off people or they're gonna move. And then how are we gonna attract businesses? And if we have cap and trade, how are our businesses, our manufacturing businesses, going to have their competitive edge? They're not. Out-of-state companies are gonna have competitive edge. So there's a lot of things that we have to look at, about the economy, and Eileen and I differ on that quite a bit.
Okay. Any closing comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I
About
just-
your, more about just, about your positions? not-
Yeah, I just need to clarify that. I am not a corporate lobbyist. I was the person who pushed for new ideas and innovation in my company. I am the person that saw my company manage its way through 4 different EPA trades, and I've seen how we handle environmental regulations and can bring that to the market much more efficiently than, we can solve that problem in the free market much more efficiently than the government can. And we need to understand that for all corporations, including mine, the most important asset that we have is Oregonians. It's our workforce. It's our customers that are our Oregonian customers. We're not going to just pick up and leave because the state says something bad. We are going to stay here because this is where our market is. This is where our home is. And we want to make Oregon better. And the way that we're going to do that is to help the Oregon economy overall.
Jack?
I just want to clarify, I didn't say that you were a corporate lobbyist. I said there's enough of them there.
Well, we have a different point of
Well,
view.
yeah, right, there's a lot.
Very different point of view.
So, but a few of the things that I would want to work in as a legislature was be the fix for House Bill 4079. Also, I had a great meeting with Neighbor Impact and found out that they were on their way to building 3 homeless shelters for Central Oregon, and they had $10 or $12 million saved up, and the legislator took it away because they said, oh, you're not using that money. It was just in the account, so they took it away. And that really prohibited them from doing anything. They had to just scrounge and try to get money to have their accounts payable just to pay the people that were working. And now, if they don't use the money by the time the legislative session's at the end, they'll take it. So they have to use it for rent vouchers, things like that. So they spend the money as they get it instead of being able to save it. So that is something that we can do for a legislature fix as well. Went on a ride along with our Redmond PD and I asked him, what's your biggest problem? And he said, Walmart. And I said, why Walmart? And he said, well, that Walmart used to be able to have communication with the DA, our district attorney, and if it was petty theft, they would get him on some program, and it was fine. But now somebody sued, so we need a legislative fix, so we don't spend 1/3 of our time and our forces at Walmart. That's how much police force is at Walmart.
At Walmart?
1/3 of it, yeah, that's how much time they spend there. So, those are some great fixes I think we can do for our community, and I think it could help out a lot, so.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming in today. I mean, all of us are indebted to you guys both stepping up and